Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. It's been another topsy-turvy year for Oklahoma's cotton crop. Today, SUNUP's Dave Deacon takes us to Altus to visit with our Extension Cotton Specialist, Randy Bowman.
How does the cotton crop look in southwest Oklahoma?
Well, Dave, I tell you what, we really have an extreme mixed bag of results this year. There's no doubt about it. I guess, you know, we can kind of talk a little bit about how the season started out. 2014 has been schizophrenic. I think that's the kindest way to put it. We ended up early on failing a large amount of our wheat acres because we had virtually no rainfall.
Right.
And that would be through about the 1st of April or maybe even the middle of May in this area. And then sometime around the middle of May, Memorial Day, things began to turn around a little bit, and we actually had really good rainfall for the last half of May, for the month of June, and really had very high rainfall for us for the month of July. I believe the numbers were about 7 inches or so in July. Unfortunately, we kind of hit a wall in August. In some areas, we're going to have a yield that is going to be rather questionable in terms of overall economics. The cost of harvesting is going to be significant versus what our returns would be. In other places where we might have had a little bit more rain in the month of July, certainly at least in some areas, we're going to have some crops that we're going to be pretty proud of, at least in the Altus area. And I suspect that we're going to actually harvest some fields well over a bale per acre, which, you know, that's the highest yields that we've had here in this area since 2010. If we look at the overall big picture, moving out away from, say, Jackson County and the irrigation district, and we look at the big picture of the state, we're going to have 4 bale production in a lot of areas this year. Typically, in what we've begun to see over the last few years is up in the Carnegie, Hydro, Fort Cobb area, right up in you know, the old historic peanut country. Our acres of cotton have increased there over the last few years, I think, and certainly this year it's up quite a bit. We had a large number of growers up in that area that made 4 bale plus production in 2013, and a lot of those guys expanded their acres in 2014. But you know, we're going to see low yields from, I don't know, 150 to 200 pounds perhaps up to 4 bales per acre in the state. And quality is going to range, it's going to run the gamut too, because we're going to see some of these lower yielding fields that because of the moisture stress that they went through in the month of August, we're going to see fiber quality issues with those. And associated with those fiber quality issues is going to be a lower loan value and ultimately what they get out of that cotton in the market. So, and again, some of the other cotton that's irrigated, we're going to see, you know, top shelf cotton quality, not just yield, but also fiber quality that can pretty much compete with a lot of the growths around the globe. So again, it's a real mixed bag.
Physiologically speaking, what makes August so important to the cotton plant? Well,
the August time frame coincides with the maximum use of water of the cotton plant. And you know, typically we can get along with about 1/10 of an inch to maybe 1/1500ths of an inch per day fairly early, but once we get into the squaring phase and certainly well on into blooming and start to establish bolls, which again a lot of that is going on in August, we see our crop evapotranspiration needs increase exponentially. And there's a lot of times when, you know, I think our 10-year average for the month of August would be about 0.35 inches per day, or in that neighborhood. And so what we were experiencing this year on some days in August was again ET rates or evapotranspiration rates of close to 0.5 inches. And so if we can't you know, we really didn't have hardly any subsoil moisture coming into this year. If we don't have good subsoil moisture to start out with, we have a hard time making it on our rainfall,
Right.
on our normal rainfall. We had a really a prime example of a crop supposedly living from paycheck to paycheck with
Right.
respect to rainfall this year.
Mm-hmm.
We did see that, and so if we could have gotten another paycheck in August of a couple of 3 inches, we would have certainly wouldn't have failed hardly any of this cotton, number one, and number two, we would have had some really respectable yields.
Do you feel comfortable about the 2015 crop?
I really do, and you know, there's if we plot a lot of the environmental data, each year has trended to be a little bit better. And the good news is that in 2014, the crop evapotranspiration daily rates and accumulated total kind of lines up with the long-term average. Our cotton heat unit accumulation for the season has become more normal, which is really good. And you know, I guess that the thing that's really kind of holding over our heads, there's really two issues. One of them is we have a 48-inch rainfall deficit since January of 2011, right here. If we were to take and sum our normal rainfall from say 1971 through 2000 for the Altus area, and plot that out, and then plot out the actual rainfall that we have, and compare those, I believe that we're sitting at about 114 of normal rainfall that we should have had since January of 2011. And so as we look at where we're at today, we were about 48 inches below that. That deficit is huge, and that's one of the reasons why we don't see, you know, water in the lake coming into the watershed. We haven't had, even though we've had 60-something inches of rain during this period of time, we have had actually minimal runoff from that, and a large number, dozens upon dozens of rainfall events that come in and maybe, you know, provide us with a tenth today or maybe 2/10 later, and but we might get, you know, 20 or 30 of those during the winter months, or maybe even 40, and it just doesn't give us what we need. We're not getting a significant amount of moisture into the soil. The other issue that we have is as we're moving into 15 is the cotton market and the price situation. And basically what we're looking at now is cotton that's probably, you know, priced in the low 60s, which that's down substantially, certainly since the highs that we observed in 2011. So the market situation in 15 is going to become very important as to the mood that our growers are going to be in, as to, you know, whether or not they want to, you know, to try to raise a crop with whatever market that we're seeing.
Okay, Randy Bowman, thank you much.
If you'd like to learn more about growing cotton and other crops in the southwest part of our state, you'll get the chance this winter. The Red River Crops Conference is January 27th and 28th in Childress, Texas, featuring specialists from both the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service and Texas AgriLife Extension. You'll hear about the latest on cotton, canola, wheat, and much more. For information, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. Joining us now is Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. And Kim, we just saw how cotton is looking this year in southwest Oklahoma. Let's start there this week with sort of the cotton production picture overall.
Well, let's do a little history on cotton production. You look at world cotton production. In 2004, we had about a 28 million bale increase in world cotton production. You go back to prior to 2004, the 10 years prior to that, we averaged about 90 million bales a year. From 2004 through predicted 14, 118 million bales of cotton. The United States, we didn't have that shift like they did in the world. Yes, in 2004, 2005, and 2006, we did have slightly higher production. But if you look at prior to 2004 and after 2004, we really had about a 2 million bale decline in U.S. cotton production. Oklahoma, planted acres have declined, since 2004, about 15,000 acres, but our yield has increased, and so our production of cotton has increased about 76,000 bales.
And what about cotton prices then?
Well, you look at cotton prices, I said we had a shift. we didn't have the shift in prices until about 2008. You look at 04 through 08, our prices averaged 48, 49 cents a pound. 2009 through 14, they're expected to average 76, 77 cents a pound. Our current price is around 64.5, 65 cents. And this year's annual price is projected to be in about that level.
Let's shift gears now to wheat. You've been talking about this $6 price level the past few weeks. Is that a support level or a resistance level?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I said that if it'll just cross 6, then we're going to run to 620. We did cross 6. We got 2 closes above that. We got up about 615, 616. It went back down below 6. Went above 6, below 6. It's just wallering around 6. This last week is 594 to 607. I'm calling $6 level no man's land. I think the important price to watch now is $6.20. If we can get above 620, then we've got some room to run for higher prices.
What about the global picture? What are you keeping an eye on there?
Well, it's just not much going on right now. The northern hemisphere crop's essentially done. The southern hemisphere is fixing to start. Got Russia. They've said, well, probably lower production there. Not really much matters. I think the big news this week is that the Federal Reserve announced that they're stopping the quantitative easing. The financial gurus say that the value of the dollar relative to other currencies is going to go higher. That makes our wheat more expensive on the world market, lower exports. Hadn't seen much impact though, but that's the talk.
Okay, and then finally, producers want to know how low those prices may go.
I've been spending a lot of time looking at that. I think we've seen our low price for the year, around $5.30. I think prices are going to hold. The futures price or the Kansas City contract around $5.50. But if you look at the 14, our 15, 16, we have a big crop next year. I think our cash prices could get down around $4 at the very bottom, $4.50, something like that. We could see those prices. I really expect the bottom price to be around $4.75, but we could get to 4.
Okay. Kim Anderson, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Consider joining us in Norman this Saturday, November 1st, for the National Weather Festival at the National Weather Center. From 2 to 10, you have a chance to learn about the National Weather Service offices and products, watch weather balloon launches, check out TV helicopters, enjoy fun-filled children's activities, visit with emergency responders, and join the Mesonet crew as we celebrate our 20th anniversary. All of this is at the National Weather Center in Norman, Saturday, November 1st. Wednesday morning, October 29th, was just a taste of what we can expect a lot more of as we ease into winter. 2 locations dropped to freezing. Camargo nudged the freezing mark with a 32-degree low. Beaver had 1 hour at or below freezing with a low of 31 degrees. Medicine Park was the warmest spot Wednesday morning at 51 degrees, 30 degrees warmer than Beaver. 79 of Mesonet's 120 sites had morning lows in the 30s. The count of the number of days with less than a quarter inch of rain has been climbing. As of Tuesday, Mangum has gone 52 days with little rain. Many Oklahoma locations have gone 15 or more days. Here's Gary with a check on drought.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everybody. Do you remember that big rain we had about 3 weeks ago? Well, that was the last good rains we've had across the state. And so with all the warm temperatures lately, drought is beginning to increase once again. Well, unfortunately, we've had a large increase in extreme to exceptional drought, the worst 2 categories, across southwestern Oklahoma, as well as intensifications across parts of northwestern and central Oklahoma. So those areas were the worst hit recently. Now, we did have that big rain a few weeks ago, but really that's it, as I said. October rainfall is very misleading as shown by the Mesonet maps. The statewide average will finish near normal, but obviously that is because of the large rainfalls across eastern Oklahoma where widespread amounts of 5 to 9 inches fell. Meanwhile, across far southwestern Oklahoma, they received less than an inch, definitely a case of the haves and have-nots for October. The haves and have-nots show up nicely on this percent of normal map as well. where the southwestern parts of the state had less than 40% of normal, and the northeast was way up around 200% of normal. Way too much red and orange on the map to call October a success, unfortunately. Unless you're up in the eastern parts of the state, or various other parts of the state that managed to get a little bit of rainfall. Now hopefully by this time next week we'll be talking about another good rain and earlier in the week, so keep our fingers crossed for that one. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
During the fall of the year, of course, is the time when we wean the calves, but it's also a time when we'll decide which cows are going to be culled and not kept around for another year. One of the things that I think we should include in our culling criteria is udder soundness. And especially in those herds where forage quantity may be low again this year and we need to cull just a little bit deeper, let's take a look at the udders of these cows to see which ones may have had some problems in the past and therefore are affecting the milk producing capability of that cow. Research here at Oklahoma State for several years gave us some surprising results, I thought, in terms of the incidence of mastitis, and that's the disease that occurs in the udder of beef or dairy cows that causes those udders to be non-productive. The incidence was in some cases in the 17 to 13% range of the cows that had clinical mastitis, but in one study it got as high as 37%. What did that mean? Well, the final proof of the pudding came in terms of the impact it had on weaning weights of the calves. Those cows that were affected in either 1 or 2 quarters, they produced in the neighborhood of 12 to as low as 9.6% less weaning weight because of the loss of milk production. In today's market, that's 50 to 60 pounds less calf that we have available to wean, and certainly that means a lot of dollars at weaning time. So let's think about this. As we're watching these cows as they go through the chute this fall, watch for those that may have that very large funnel-shaped teat, or those cows that have lost the strength of that suspensory ligament that holds the udder up next to the body. In either case, those situations make it very difficult for her newborn baby to find that teat in time to get the colostrum that he or she needs for disease protection, and probably means that they're just not going to produce as much milk for that calf all through his growth phase. Let's watch for these cows very closely as they go through the chute, cull those that have those bad udders, and it'll help our herd in the long run. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk about generators.
Okay, we have a generator here, and on the side of it says inverter. And what does that mean to the purchaser?
Well, what you need to look at is the electrical signal that comes out of it. Sure, it's 60 hertz, 120 volts, but what that signal looks like as far as noise is going to determine whether you've got a generator or an inverter.
And so if it's clean power, what we call clean power, it's going through an inverter, and that's the type of power that you could run through some electronic equipment.
So the inverter type of power units are going to give you a more regulated signal, so it's going to be a lot more consistent, and that's what your devices that have clocks in them really need.
So that's a little tip about the difference between inverters and non-inverter generators.
We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
We're talking animal health now as it relates to those who work with livestock and with events involving the public. Joining us now is Chris Richards, one of our beef cattle extension specialists. And Chris, kind of tell us what some of the things you and the team in animal science have been looking at.
Lyndall, normally we think of pathogen problems with livestock from the standpoint of the transfer of things like E. coli and salmonella to food products. But we also have some risk for people that are exposed to livestock, whether that's agricultural producers, whether it's people attending fairs and expositions, or even this time of year with all the agritourism events where they have petting zoos and things like that. There's an opportunity for those pathogens to transfer directly from the animals to some of the public or people working with or interacting with those animals.
And you're seeing more popularity with these types of events all the time, correct?
We are seeing a lot more popularity with those type of events, and so we're wanting to bring some attention to those and talk about some of the concerns that there may be and ways to prevent some of those issues.
In particular, what types of things are you guys looking at in terms of some of these diseases?
We've had some ongoing research projects that they've been looking at the prevalence of E. coli, particularly the strains that can be pathogenic to people and affect people. So we've been looking at the prevalence of those both in cow-calf operations and feedlot operations in our research efforts, as well as looking at ways that we can control those in the animal and the things that we can do to minimize those in the animal.
And as part of communicating some of those prevention measures, you and some of the team are putting together a workshop that people can attend for free?
We are. We're teaming up with the Oklahoma Beef Quality Assurance Program with a grant funded under the USDA initiatives to host a conference that we're calling Managing Farm Health for Public Health. And we're going to be talking about not only the facts that we've learned in our research about E. coli and working with the cattle and managing those populations in cattle, but we're also going to be talking about things that we can do at public events where animals are present to control the transfer of those, talk about some of the risk assessments that go along with that. We'll be working with the health department to talk about what their role is in managing these situations if they do occur. And we'll also be summarizing with some ways to talk to both producers and the public about dealing with these situations and good terminologies to use and good points to make when you're communicating about pathogens between humans and animals.
It sounds like a pretty well-rounded event. If I'm interested in attending, tell me when and where and how to get involved.
We'll be hosting this event November 12th. It starts at 8:30 a.m. at the Grand Casino and Hotel in Shawnee, Oklahoma. You can go to beefextension.com and find the phone number to register or register online at that location.
Okay, important topics, and I'm glad you guys are addressing it. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Lyndall.
Many landowners are interested in how many white-tailed deer are on their property. This is commonly done with a spotlight survey or a camera survey. However, just knowing deer density is not entirely informative, because a property can have a deer per 20 acres and actually be understocked, and another property might have a deer per 40 acres and be overstocked. And this is all based on the amount of available forage. And one of the best ways to get an idea of that is through something called a browse survey that we conduct in late winter, early spring. And the way we do this is we select points across the landscape, divide our property into major vegetation types. Let's say you have forest and grassland and half your property is in each type. So we would try to have the same number of points within each type of vegetation. And I would recommend at least 1 point per quarter section of land that you own or manage. If you own small properties, if you only have a quarter section or half section, then maybe do 4 per quarter section. And what we're going to do is randomly pick points on the landscape, and once you get to that point, you're going to pace out 5 steps from the center point, and we're going to do this in every direction. And so you're going to form a circle, and everything within that circle, we're going to count the number of stem tips on woody plants that have been browsed by deer. And we're going to do that, say, up to about 6 foot and then down to the ground. So for each species of plant, you're going to count every stem on that plant and put them in a column of either it's been browsed or unbrowsed. And it's really easy to tell if a plant has been browsed by deer. They lack upper incisors, so the browse points are usually really jagged as opposed to a sharp clip that a rabbit would have if it browsed on that plant. So they're usually really jagged, and we're just going to sum those up for every species of plant. Now, we do this in February, early February, right before green up, because at that point of the year, typically we've had the most browsing pressure because deer are utilizing these woody plants all during the winter. So it's more difficult to identify species, and you can use something like the Field Guide to Oklahoma Plants, and by looking at the bud and the bark type and the architecture of the plant, we can get a good idea of what species we're looking at. But if you want to make it a little easier, you might want to come out in the fall when the leaves are still on and mark these plants with something unique. You can use different colored magic markers, different colored rubber bands, whatever, and mark by species so that when you come back in the late winter to those predetermined points, you'll know what you're looking at. The key to making this work is you need to know for each species of plants if it's a low or a high preference browse, a moderate preference, or a low preference. And we have a document, White-tailed Deer Habitat Evaluation Guide. That's document E979, and that will tell you for each of these woody plants how much of a preference a deer have for that plant. But just to give you an idea, things like elm and hackberry are generally high preference forages, whereas redbud is moderate, and things like eastern red cedar is very low. So once we've calculated for a property if we're lightly stocked, moderately stocked, or understocked, or heavily stocked, then you can compare that to your estimated deer density from your camera survey or spotlight survey and make changes in harvest and see how you change the actual density over time. It takes a little bit of effort to do this, but if you really want to gauge how many deer are on your property and if those deer are within the carrying capacity of the land, this is an excellent way to do it.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.